Right, good morning. So, we're now doing halachas of Hachnosa Shabbos, of preparation for Shabbos. We're going to be discussing the mitzvah to wash and to trim nails on Erev Shabbos. So let's take a look. Says the Mechaber in Reish Samach Sif Aleph. Mitzvah lirchaitz. There is a mitzvah to wash. Now, interestingly, the Mechaber carries on Panov Yodav V'Raglov. Your hands, your face, your hands, and your feet. But the Ramah adds in Kol Gufay. So he changes the nusach of the Mechaber and says Mitzvah lirchaitz Kol Gufay, to wash your whole body. V'im ef lirchaitz, and if you can't do your whole body, Panov Yodav V'Raglov, at least you should wash your hands, your face, and your feet. B'chamin on more mortar be'erev Shabbos. Or mitzvah lochav harosh, and it's a mitzvah also to wash your hair. And to cut your nails be'erev Shabbos. Says the Vayter, says the Mechaber, says the Ramah, and if your hair is long, mitzvah legalchon, it's a mitzvah to take a haircut on Erev Shabbos. And when you cut your nails, don't do it in order of your fingers, just going across. But yaschel b'small, you start with the left hand, b'kamitza, which is this finger over here. Of yamin, and on the right hand be'etzba, which is this finger here. For siman lezeh the bahagot bismoila v'daiga b'yamin, which basically is on my left hand. It's this. Yeah, don't do it in order. So you do this, there, and there, and then if you just put your other hand on top of it, you do the same again. So it would be basically this. Okay, let's say the Mishnah Berurah. Some very interesting things. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Aleph. Why is there a mitzvah to wash? Because, says the Mishnah Berurah, Kavod Shabbos. It's not a chiyuv to do it. But if you do it, you're makabel schar. If you don't, then you don't get an einish. Now, interestingly, there's no mention of mikveh, no mention of tefillah, right? So what's that about? So if you look in footnote number 1, he says, the Mechaber, the Ramah, do not mention tefillah. Avalakamon in Tov Kuf Nun Aleph, in Erev Shabbos Chazayin, which is topical, and I was next Erev Shabbos. And we are noiheg nowadays, but generally speaking, washing on Erev Shabbos, we wouldn't dream of not having a shower before Shabbos. It's because the setup nowadays is so much easier than days of old. But and therefore, in Shabbos Chazayin, the post can say you can shower next Erev Shabbos no problem, even though it's the 9 days. If you would normally shower on Erev Shabbos, you can certainly prepare in the same way. But regarding Tefillah on Erev Shabbos Chazayin, he says further on in Tov Kuf Nun Aleph, Kosav Shaharogil Litbal Erev Shabbos, Kol Erev Shabbos. If someone has the minhag to go to the mikveh every Erev Shabbos, Mutar Gam Erev Shabbos Chazayin, then he's also allowed to do it next week as well. Interestingly, he says after you go to the mikveh, you should wash your hands, your face, and your feet. It doesn't say feet. Generally speaking, we avoid showering after the mikveh. The showers are there before you go into the mikveh, and then you go to the mikveh. Okay, so that's what the Shevet HaLevi deals with that. Okay, now interesting. What should be the seder of everything? So he says here, the order of the preparation for Shabbos is B'Shem HaShlo, writing the name of the Shlo. First of all, you trim your nails, and then you go to the mikveh. And then you do your Shnai Mikra afterwards. We'll get to Shnai Mikra, Mr. Hashem. The Be'er Hativ writes further on, B'Shem HaKavonos, he says it the other way around. Actually, you should cut your nails, you should do Shnai Mikra first, and then cut your nails. Okay. You should try and do this after Chatzos. Reish Peh should be Lakaman, I think. Okay, that will talk about the best time to do Shnai Mikra. That's coming up. Okay, back to the Mishnah Berurah. Second line. You got to be careful when you showering on Erev Shabbos. Don't leave it too late, because you could come to Chilul Shabbos. If you look at number 2, we'll do that in a second. What Chilul Shabbos are you talking about? And this is much more problematic in the short winter days, for the short Fridays, that you can sit, you can be getting ready, and it's mamish getting dark outside. And even though you may have finished washing before the Zman, you're still going to have problems of Chilul Shabbos, because sometimes you can comb your hair afterwards, because that could be an Issa Malacha Deraisa b'Shabbos. V'gam motzu she'achar gemar kol ha'pula soichet ha'aluntis ma'mayim she'nivle boy. You squeeze out the towel. V'hu b'chalal mechabes. That's the problem of kibbutz, of laundry. K'may she'voy lekam b'simen shin beis. V'roy lekol mi she'noga yirash Hashem b'liboy limnoyet ha'omizeh. Make sure you stop people if you can from leaving it too late on Erev Shabbos. V'zuchus harabim yetolu boy. You shouldn't get caught up in their avera. Anyone who can protest against his home from doing things which they shouldn't do and doesn't, he is going to consider punishable for it. So you are culpable if you can and don't protest. If you look at number 2, interesting. He says, we're going to say soon that it's good to do it as close to Shabbos as possible. That's if you're washing at home. But back in the day when you have to go to the bathhouse, the central place, and the concept of getting ready early, so that you can actually have an hour in your big day Shabbos, and you're not rushing, to come into Shabbos. That's also Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky used to say that the challenge of yesteryear in America, and certainly in the early years, in the early 1900s, was Chilul Shabbos. If you didn't come back tomorrow, now the problem is there's not so much Shmir Shabbos, but Shmir Erev Shabbos. You're coming into Shabbos, belachatz, rushing home from work and running into the shower if you can, and then coming to shul. But if you can get ready a little bit early and you can prepare and read and whatever, that's learn for Shabbos. That's certainly a much better way to come into Shabbos. Remember, the Dayan was always here 20 minutes early on Erev Shabbos. He would always be ready, and anyway. Lirchitz. So says Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Base. For Gamal Hanoshim Shaykh Mitzvah Rechitza, this is across the board. It's for men and women to wash, the mitzvah of washing for Shabbos. Again, they should also be Mekayim the mitzvah by washing their hands, face, and feet. So to men, if they haven't got time. Now, would you have to wash your feet nowadays? But for Cha'is, he says, we're not so worried about washing your feet nowadays. For Efshan, perhaps the reason is the Dafka Dafka in their countries, they would go barefoot, and therefore their feet would get dirty and dusty. Because we wear shoes and things. Okay, Be'er Shabbos. And it's not just Erev Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to wash. Hu adin b'chol zeh be'erev yontif. But to wash in preparation for Shabbos on Thursday is not really covered Shabbos. And unless you can't on Erev Shabbos. And really, the closer you get to Shabbos, the better. With the caveat of not getting too close. He says in footnote 7. What about washing on going? Sometimes the kids, they take a bath on Thursday night or something like that, early Friday morning. So he says, because of what the Mishnah Berurah just said in footnote 7, you shouldn't wash on Thursday night, lekavod Shabbos. It's a bit too far away from Shabbos. Maybe Friday morning, maybe that's different. You're doing that lekavod Shabbos. It just seems strange to me that the kids, before they go to school, they're washing lekavod Shabbos. It seems not really lekavod Shabbos. But I suppose if there's no alternative, then what can you do? Now this is a very interesting question. Friday in Eretz Yisrael is, I remember in Yeshiva, the Mashgiach used to say, Friday is lo Friday. But people go to the beach, right? So do you have, if you've been to the beach and maybe do you have to? Is that enough? So he says, you go to the pool or to the beach. They should still wash with warm water after that lekavod Shabbos. Okay, say that. Okay, but just he says in the next two footnotes, he says, but that's dafka talking about showering and haircuts. You should do close to Shabbos. But with regard to laundry, if that's okay to the covered Shabbos to do that on Thursday, that's okay. And also, if you Chaim Kanievsky writes that if you want to wash the house, and if you do that on Thursday and it's not going to get dirty again for Shabbos, then you can make the mitzvah that way. Okay, Sivkot involved, but Erev Shabbos. So now we're talking about the cutting nails. So that you should do on Erev Shabbos, and dafka not on Thursday. Why? Because nails will regrow on the third day after you cut them. Therefore, if you cut them on Thursday, that means Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, they're going to start regrowing on Shabbos. It's because it looks a bit funny because they're re-emerging now on Shabbos, and therefore you should cut them on Friday, not on Thursday. Now, if you look at number 11, he brings another reason. In footnote 11, he quotes the Shatzian, quoting the Eli Rabbah. Omnom b'shem achreinim kosov Eli Rabbah. Sorry, Tamacher. The Eli Rabbah gives another reason, and that is shekivin shatzipernaim maschilas legidol b'yom shlishi lekitzos, and since they regrow on day 3, im yikses oisom b'yom chamishi hari aschilo legadol b'Shabbos v'nechshev kamisha gerim shetchilas gloson tiyeh b'Shabbos, and therefore it looks like it's growing on Shabbos. And the Shevet HaLevi says, and therefore it's a srach meleches Shabbos doing it, which is an interesting way to look at it. Okay, and therefore, but the haircuts on a Thursday is not a problem because they don't grow that quickly, he says, and therefore taking a haircut on a Thursday, lekavod Shabbos would be different to cutting nails, and that would be acceptable. Okay, carrying on the Mishnah Berurah, Yesha Kosfu sheloi lokot siparnei ha'yadayim v'raglayim b'yom echad, that you shouldn't cut your hand and your feet nails on the same day. He says in footnote 12, the problem is sakana. He says Tamadov Kosva Shulchan Aruch Harav mipnei chashash sakana, and if you cut them in the night time, that's already the day. So if you cut them on Wednesday night, then that's considered like Thursday, because the day follows the night. But what about women? Women, before they go to mikveh, they trim their nails of both their hands and their feet. So there they apply Shomei Mitzvah Lo Yedei Davaro, and therefore there's no concern of sakana, because the person is Shomei Mitzvah, he won't come to bad. Okay, back to the Mishnah Berurah, 4 lines from the bottom. Ve'ein lokot el be'erev Shabbos erev Yontiv. You should really cut nails on erev Shabbos and erev Yontiv. Va'nochen sheyokos min haraglayim b'yom chamishi. And therefore, the best thing to do is to cut, in order to make it the lekavod Shabbos, to cut your toenails on Thursday. U'minoyadayim b'yom shishi, your hand nails, or your fingernails on Friday. Issa b'gemara hatzoyref tziponayim chosid. Someone who burns the nails is a chosid. Kovron, and if you bury them, you're a tzaddik. Zarkon, and if you just throw them out, rasha. Why? Shemetava alein ishmu beres v'tapel. Because Rachmana litzlan, a woman who is pregnant could walk past on those nails, and that's a sakana, and she might Rachmana litzlan miscarry. And therefore, if you're in a place where it's not likely for there to be for there to be women, for example, in the Beis HaMedrash or Beis HaMerchatz, which is a male-only bathhouse, mutal izrog, then there's not a concern. According to the Gemara, the problem is only in the place where you actually throw them. But once they've moved from there to another place, there's not a problem. If you collect them and then throw them outside, then there isn't the sakana, because it's in the initial place where they fall. That's the problem. That is the sakana. Because of a precious simon reish mamalav mekan timchotov b'beis mokum deshkich nosh. Therefore, if you cut them at home in a place where there are other people around, for nofel miyodek tzatziponov, then what should you do? Just move them around, just sweep them away to a different place, and therefore there's not a problem, because it's the initial place that is the problem. For Eli Rabbi Kosov, the efshe dafka k'shtichen chutz lecheder have a shinu mokum. If you daf, maybe it's not just into a different place in that room, maybe you've got to actually relocate them to a different room, and therefore then there will be no sakana. And you should wash your hands after you cut your nails. If you look at 17, he says, Therefore, you should, because of that, you should wash your hands immediately after cutting your nails. And also, he says it's dai benetilas haydayim pamachas. You don't have to do it with 3 times. And he says that he quotes the Kseis HaShulchan, Shu beinim notel tziponi yad, beinim notel tziponi ragle. However, some people, so he says to do both hand nails and other nails. Now, interestingly, what about nowadays? How do we dispose of them nowadays? So we don't burn or bury them. However, most people seem to flush them down the toilet, and that seems to be a good way of disposing of them. But if you look at note 15, it's very interesting. Some of the Gedolim were very makbid to burn them. 15, he says, Tam adovish streifa difir al kfura. If you burn them, it's considered more chashuv. This is footnote 15 on the previous page. Kosav Rashi, because if you bury them, that's not as good because they may become sort of re-exposed again. You've got a problem. Then he says the Chazon Ish, amazingly, he would keep all his nail trimmings in an envelope, and he would burn it with the chometz. Astonishing, right? If you're worried that you keep this envelope the whole year till Erev Pesach, you're worried they're going to spill or whatever, you forget. Okay. What was Rabbi Yashav's practice? He would keep them in a piece of paper and he would burn them on every Erev Shabbos. Very interesting. And then he says, throwing them down the toilet, Rabbi Nisman Kara says that's considered kvura ma'ula, and that's considered fine. However, you're not called a chassid because you're not actually destroying them from the world; they're still around somewhere. And then he quotes the Stipler that says that, but you have them in the kind of mitzvah of sarafan. Okay, either way, I think that certainly according to Nisman Kara, flushing down the toilet is a way of eliminating them nowadays. If you want to burn them on Erev Shabbos, then nikra chassid. Let's finish off. Sif Kotzen Ches Lo Yitol Betashbetz Kosov Shemaram Lo Digdig B'Zeh. Now this is talking about doing them in the order. So Lechat Chila, you should try and cut your nails in the order. Again, left hand first, and it's this finger, then that finger, then this finger, that finger, and then you put your hand on top, but exactly the same with the right hands. However, the Tashbetz quotes the Maharam, who is not makbid on this, V'chein Kosvel Ari, Mikol Kom Yesh Lizohe Lechat Chila, and if you he quotes in number footnote 19 because it's kosher l'shikcha. If you trim your nails in the in order like that, it's kosher l'shikcha and other things, and therefore one should try lechatchila to do it in the order that the Ramah says. Let's just do base and finish off this simon. It's a very short sif. Says the Mechaber in base. When you get close to Shabbos, you should say to your household in a gentle way, Isartem, Eravtem, Hifrashtem Chala. Have you been mafresh Maisa? Have you done the Erev? And have you been mafresh Chala? And then say to them, light the candles. That's Loshen Sivui. Says the Ramah. Says the Mishmurot, Sivkot and Tes, when it's still possible to do something about it. But the reason why you're delaying to ask this until now, because if you tell them at lunchtime on Friday, they'll say, what's the rush, Daddy? There's plenty of time. But if you leave it till just close to Shabbos, they realize, well, now is the time, because if not now, then you've lost it. It's a klal gadol in Shalom Bayis and in life generally, that if you speak in a gentle, soft way, people will receive it better. So you shouldn't be too, especially on Erev Shabbos, when sometimes it's a bit stressful and tense, one shouldn't impose too much anger and fear in your home. Because of out of fear for you, they'll be mechal Shabbos because out of fear they might do worse things, and therefore you might come to Isurim, like the Gemara says in Gittin, etc. Isartem the chol hani ein yochel asos machach b'Shabbos. Once Shabbos comes in, you can't do these things. Lakach yizar is oideisam be'erev Shabbos. That's why you've got to deal with this in Erev Shabbos. Eravtem of makom she'ein derech laniach erev chatzeres ki erev Pesach le'erev Pesach, which is the practice nowadays that you do the erev chatzeres once a year. V'gam erev tchumim ein derech laniach Ein tzarich lemazeh. Then you don't need to say ravatem because it's just not shaykh every week. Hifrashtem chala v'choeis ein noagin nishal zeh. Nowadays again we don't need to ask this. V'ayim b'tshuvas knes yecheskel simin chaf gimel shekasu tam lezeh. Ach be'erev Pesach b'vaday tzarich nishal. Erev Pesach is very important to ask this. If you made baked your matzahs, have you been mafresh the challah because v'imchol Shabbos tzarich nishal be'erev Shabbos ayin shom because you're in a big mess if you haven't. Okay, ayin shom. Hadliku. Befatach, in other words, it's hadliku, hahu blushan tzivu, in other words, light the candles. The ein shaykh she'ela, because it's not applicable, it's not she'ela. If it was a chirik, it's hidliku, it's a question mark, because it's not a question. The haroya shlo hudluk, and that's what Rashi says. V'hu hadin shah yasirim v'yashiv tzugim lasis malacha, to stop them doing from other malacha, v'imhu oz beis hamedrash, aviv makamachet tzarech lishlach ache sheyasirim halazeh. You send them a text, or send the messenger back if you're not at home to make sure they've prepared, done all the preparations. Seder.
It says not to give him permission, and then it turns around and says to give him permission.
Yeah. So it seems like the toenails, the growth of them is not so nikar, either slower or it's not recognizable. Your hands, it's much more recognizable. I was thinking that. Yeah, maybe that's the answer.
One of the notes says that the toenails can even do oneself. I think it's
Because it's
because you don't because you don't see it. People don't see it.
right. It's not nikar. The toenails are not nikar. Therefore, we're doing that on Thursday. Yeah. Okay. Say that.